We're talking about something that you've done not once, but twice, starting your own company. And we've talked about, can't believe this is real, 2 years ago, because as we're recording right now, Jeff, as you recall, this is about the 2 year anniversary of when we first started My World. We said we're going to come out
Yes.
right after WrestleMania. Here we are. Time flies, man. Well, listen,
Right.
we uh we told the story of how you start TNA, and I think those are some of my favorite episodes because really and truly, and I mean this, and I know there's going to be a lot of people who disagree with this, but there's only two people who can tell that story: Tony Khan and Jeff Jarrett. Tony Khan started AEW out of thin air. Jeff Jarrett started TNA out of thin air, and nobody else has that story to tell. Nobody has gotten that type of viewership, gotten that sort of success. I mean, both of these companies are still running today. And there was another one you tried, and we've talked about your return to Impact, but now today it's time for us to finally, I've been looking forward to this one, discuss Global Force Wrestling. And there's been a lot of discussion about your time in TNA and how it came to an end and all that jazz. And we'll talk about that another time in more detail. But when you find yourself no longer at the helm in TNA, you still are excited about the opportunity. This is your family business. It's all you've really ever done. It makes sense for you to find a spot to build another company. And I'm sure you said to yourself, hey, I can do this again. Why were you itching to do it again? And were you hoping to apply some of the lessons you learned from starting TNA originally to this venture?
Starting Global Force Wrestling. So that is kind of our diving off point. And Conrad, as I looked at the research, and candidly, there was a lot of the research that's not public. This is all, Conrad, a lot of this may be for the first time. I don't know how in depth we've got, but the first time you've even heard some of this stuff. But I didn't really know where you wanted to jump off, because the TNA story, I don't say was a lot simpler, but WCW went away. There was a void in the marketplace. We've heard kind of all the foundations on why I thought there was going to be an opportunity. But essentially, the number one is that without a number two, there's no such thing as a number one. And when Vince bought his competition, it was just essentially the WWE and others. And when I say others, small independent promotions around the globe. Yes, Japan had a scene, and I know there's other folks out there that, yeah, Mexico was going, but it was just a 2001, 2002, completely different generation. Here we are 20 years later. But in this scenario, here we are, 10 years later. And so, Conrad, I think the best way, why did I think, of course, I'm going to try to use all my life lessons and then some. But, in 2009, when me and, I'll call it, and I refer to it on the Dixie Power Play, and I was removed from creative, and, sent home and all that nonsense. But in 2010, I came back, and me and Bob came to an agreement, Bob Carter, that, okay, Jeff, you focus on international and live events, go create revenue. And I dove in head first, and I was really, really excited. And with Don West and others on the live events, Andy Barton, namely, we had success internationally, lots of success, even tours and everything that went with that. But that went through 2010, 2011, 2012. By the time we had gotten essentially to the end of 2012, beginning of 2013, the writing was on the wall. The conversations were being had, not just in Nashville, but in Dallas. Dean Broadhead referred to it as the financial death spiral is in process. No need to go into detail here, but I saw the writing on the wall, and I made a very conscious decision. Karen had mixed emotions about it. A lot of folks did, but I knew the trajectory. I kind of knew we were headed. I knew the internal landscape. In that, Conrad, in a lot of ways, I thought to myself, I thought, am I going to just sort of stay the course and flounder and let this ship sink? Or am I going to go gamble on myself again? Not saying that I didn't have options, because there's a lot of things, what ifs, I could have done this, I could have done that. But I knew in 2013, the way we were headed, and I say we, collectively TNA, that it was ugly and getting uglier. I know the Hogan-Dixie situation wasn't pretty. The financial situation wasn't pretty. Obviously, BHE, Bischoff-Hervey situation. The Spike relationship was beyond strained. There was some international chattering going on that the brand wasn't what it once was. Now we're 2 years in, 3 years in, and some international markets didn't want to go with the branding. They bought TNA Impact, TNA Explosion, TNA pay-per-views. And that rebranding process that went from TNA to Impact, that didn't completely go over, and there was a lot of mixed emotions there. So in so many different ways, it was a mess, Conrad. And so I think the best place to jump off into starting Global Force, I think we've got to tell somewhat of the story of the exit, or I'm going to defer to you. But it was, I knew the time was over, and I'll let you let me throw it at you back on where exactly you want to start. But because I think your opening question was, we're going to use Wessons and why, and the writing was, to me, absolutely on the wall that TNA as we knew it was no longer going to exist. The revenues had radically dropped outside of the licensing deal, and our television contract was coming up, and I didn't have any optimism at all.
So, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. Had you always had the idea that, hey, I might go do this again, I might go start another company? I mean, because you had sort of played hokey pokey with the company there for a bit, and you no longer had your arms around your baby. You weren't in the driver's seat. You were being dictated to at times. And that's probably something that I would imagine you had at least been thinking about for a while, or is that not the case?
So this is a good jumping off point. Toby Keith, we've talked about Toby being on the very first show and singing, his hit songs, and just, a longtime buddy. Me and Toby got to know each other back, 92 or 3 or 1 or whenever it was. That's when our friendship. But Toby, singer-songwriter, but a lot of folks don't even understand just how successful of a businessman. Maybe one of the smartest. Yeah, he's certainly top 3, 4, 5. I don't know. Maybe the smartest businessman I know. His acumen's unbelievable. Yes, he's a great singer and a performer and a songwriter.
Time out. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I just want our listeners to understand that when we're talking about Toby Keith, I know some non-country music fans probably think, oh, the guy who said put your boot in your ass. Okay, whatever you think of country music, let me say it again. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Continue.
Conrad, while I'm talking the Google machine, if you'll bring up Fortune magazine, Toby Keith, and find out what month he was on the cover.
Sure.
It's just a little interesting footnote.